when privacy becomes the ultimate boundary. Lessons from Audrey Watkins on adoption, autonomy, and healing. Welcome to Soft Girl Era, the sacred space where strong Black women unlearn survival, rediscover softness, and reclaim the joy, rest, and freedom they deserve without guilt, without apology, and without explanation. I'm your host, LeAnne Dolce, pronounced Dolce, like sweet softness whispered in French. And today we're diving into a conversation that will shake you, challenge you, and ultimately free you. I recently had the privilege of interviewing Audrey Watkins, a fierce advocate who's rewriting the narrative around adoption privacy. And let me tell you, this conversation lit a fire in my soul. Audrey isn't just challenging outdated beliefs, she's dismantling systems that erase the voices of birth parents, particularly Black women who made impossible choices in moments of crisis. Her work is a masterclass in boundaries, in saying no without apology, in protecting peace as a sacred practice. Audrey Watkins is making the world a better place by giving voice to the voiceless, by protecting the vulnerable, by challenging systems that prioritize curiosity over compassion. She's a warrior for those who were promised anonymity, who were told their choices would be honored, who were given a shield in their darkest hour, and she refuses to let that shield be torn away. And today I'm bringing her wisdom to you because this isn't just about adoption. It's about every woman in this room who's been told her pain doesn't matter, her choices don't count, and her privacy is negotiable. Let's start with the lie we've all been sold. The adoption world has been screaming for decades that adoptees have an absolute right to know everything, to access birth records, to uncover family histories, no questions asked. It sounds noble, doesn't it? It sounds like justice. But here's what Audrey Watkins revealed to me, and it's a truth that will rattle your bones. This so called right is tearing apart the sacred privacy that birth parents, especially Black birth mothers, fought desperately to protect. These women made choices in crisis, in poverty, in abuse, in the suffocating grip of systemic racism, and they were promised anonymity, they were promised a shield. And now that shield is being ripped away by DNA tests, by laws that ignore their consent, by a culture that prioritizes one person's identity journey over another person's survival. Audrey's own birth certificate reads Mother Unknown, and she guards that anonymity like her life depends on it because it does. This isn't about hiding, this is about honoring choices made when the world offered no other options. This is about recognizing that birth parents' privacy isn't optional. It's a lifeline protected by law, by HIPAA, by basic human decency. And yet, we live in a world where DNA tests bulldoze through sealed records, where adoptees demand access without considering the terror of unwanted reunions, the fear of stalking, the fresh wounds reopened for Black birth mothers who placed children amid poverty, abuse, or the crushing weight of systemic oppression. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but LeAnne, don't adoptees deserve to know their roots? And I hear you. But here's the question Audrey posed to me, and I'm posing it to you. Whose pain are we erasing in this know all rush? When we force birth parents to relive trauma, when we dismiss their need for privacy, when we prioritize one person's curiosity over another person's healing, we're not creating justice, like we're creating more harm. And for Black women who have been systematically silenced, exploited, and erased throughout history, this harm cuts deeper than most people will ever understand. Let me share 3 lessons Audrey Watkins dropped on me. Lessons that every woman in this room, every leader building a legacy, every sister stepping into her soft girl era needs to carry forward. First, protect privacy fiercely. Birth parents' rights aren't up for debate. Champion them in policy. Lobby your state representatives to seal records when requested. Shield families from DNA breaches. This is about more than adoption. It's about recognizing that every woman has the right to control her own narrative, to decide Who gets access to her story to say no without explanation? Second, balance heals, force destroys, push for open adoptions, but only with consent. Studies show that voluntary contact brings peace, not mandated invasions. When we honor choice, when we respect boundaries, we create space for healing. When we force connection, we create trauma. It's that simple. Third, amplify Black voices. Black birth mothers' trauma from closed adoptions demands that we prioritize their healing over adoptee demands. Advocate in your networks now. Use your platforms, your influence, your power to center the voices that have been silenced for too long. Now, let me take you deeper. Let me show you what happens when privacy is protected, when boundaries are honored, when Black women are given the space to heal on their own terms. In Georgia, there's a woman I'll call Tasha. She placed her son in a closed adoption back in 1995, right in the middle of the crack epidemic, right in the heart of Atlanta's poverty crisis. Tasha was just a teenager, a young Black girl fleeing domestic violence, running from a man who had shattered her sense of safety. She chose closed adoption not because she didn't love her son, but because she did, because she wanted him to have a chance she couldn't give him, because she needed to rebuild her life without the stigma, without the judgment, without the constant reminder of trauma she was barely surviving. For decades, Tasha healed. She built a new life. She found peace. And then in 2025, Georgia passed a law opening original birth certificates to adoptees over 18. Suddenly, DNA sites identified her without her consent. Suddenly, she was being contacted. Suddenly, the abuse trauma she had spent 30 years healing from came roaring back like a tidal wave. The panic attacks returned, the nightmares returned, the fear that her abuser might find her through these searches became real again. But Tasha didn't back down. She partnered with advocates from Lifetime Adoption, petitioned judges for veto power on releases, cited HIPAA and state privacy clauses, and she won. The court upheld her anonymity. She gained her peace back. And in that courtroom, with tears streaming down her face and her voice shaking with power, she roared, "My choice stands." That moment wasn't just a legal victory, it was a milestone in personal sovereignty. It was a declaration that her healing mattered, that her safety mattered, that her right to privacy wasn't negotiable. Let me tell you about another woman. In Minnesota, there's a Black birth mother named Lena who placed her daughter in a closed adoption during the 1980s foster care crisis in Minneapolis. Lena was a single Black mom overwhelmed by a welfare system steeped in racism, a system that judged her, scrutinized her, and made her feel like she wasn't enough. She had struggled with addiction, battled poverty, and faced a world that offered her no grace. When she chose closed adoption, it wasn't because she was running away. It was because she was trying to give her daughter a better life while also giving herself permission to start over, to escape the judgment, to heal without the weight of constant shame. For years, Lena rebuilt herself. She got clean, she found stable work, she created a life she was proud of. And then in 2024, Minnesota passed a law granting adoptees birth record access. Suddenly, her daughter was demanding contact through a registry. Suddenly, Lena was battling anxiety again, terrified that her past addiction struggles would be exposed at her job, that her coworkers would find out, that she'd lose everything she'd worked so hard to build. But Lena fought back. She used confidential intermediaries provided by the National Council for Adoption. She utilized state veto options. She emphasized the importance of birth parent consent, and her record stayed sealed. She did, however, voluntarily share non identifying medical information on her own terms, fostering controlled healing, healing that didn't re traumatize her, healing that honored her boundaries. And in a courtroom showdown that took every ounce of her courage, Lena looked the system in the eye and declared, My pain isn't your puzzle. That statement secured a permanent seal on her records. It was a triumphant stand. It was her reclaiming her story. Now, let me take you to Alaska. There's an indigenous black mixed birth mother named Aisha, whose adoption story dates back to the 1970s, during the era of the Indian Child Welfare Act. Aisha was just a teenager in a rural community, pressured by poverty and bias when she chose closed adoption. She did it to protect her family from repercussions, from judgment, from a system that had already taken so much from Indigenous communities. She chose privacy as an act of survival. For decades, that privacy held. And then in 2025, researchers began pushing for adoptee records to be open for studies on ambiguous loss. Adoptee searches through sites like Ancestry bypassed the seals that were supposed to protect her, dredging up the forced placement trauma from systemic removal that Aisha had spent a lifetime trying to heal from. The pain came flooding back, the shame, the grief, the anger at a system that had failed her and was now failing her again. But Aisha allied with Lifetime Adoption for privacy counseling. She used state laws to affirm closed adoption seals against these tech intrusions. She maintained her anonymity, and her fierce testimony, her powerful declaration that DNA doesn't own me, halted a study breach in its tracks. That moment etched her win into advocacy lore. It influenced broader calls for tech regulations in adoption. It empowered communities of color to stand up and say, our privacy matters, our healing matters, our choices matter. These stories aren't outliers, they're not exceptions. They're the reality for countless Black birth mothers who made impossible choices in impossible circumstances and deserve the dignity of privacy. They deserve the right to heal on their own terms. They deserve to have their boundaries honored. And here's what Audrey Watkins envisions if the world adopted this stance: privacy first, no forced reveals, revolution. Birth mothers, especially Black women scarred by systems that never protected them, would heal without fear. Agencies would push back against DNA breaches. Openness would bloom voluntarily on terms that honor everyone involved. Adoptees would get their identity without trampling on the rights of those who gave them life. Families would thrive in balance, in mutual respect, in healing that doesn't require one person's trauma to fuel another person's journey. But let's bring this home. Let's talk about what this means for you, for the high achieving Black woman listening right now, the one who spent years in survival mode, the one who's led teams, raised families, held down households, carried communities, and is finally ready to shift from constantly grinding to finally grounding in joy, peace, softness, and self prioritization. Audrey Watkins' fight for privacy is your fight for boundaries. It's your fight to say no without guilt. It's your fight to protect your peace as a practice. It's your fight to reclaim your identity, not the version shaped by family expectations, church roles, or boardroom rules, but the real you that's been waiting to bloom. When Audrey says birth parents' privacy is a lifeline, she's saying your boundaries are a lifeline. When she says forcing access dismisses trauma, she's saying forcing yourself to be available, to be strong, to be everything to everyone dismisses your trauma. When she says privacy enables healing, she's saying boundaries enable your healing. This is your soft girl era. This is your sacred pause. This is your quiet but powerful return to softness, rest, self trust, and radical joy. And it starts with one simple revolutionary act: protecting your privacy, your peace, your power. So here's what I need you to do: I need you to stand up, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Stand up and demand that your state honors birth parent privacy vetoes today. Demand that your workplace honors your boundaries. Demand that your family honors your need for rest. Demand that you honor yourself. Contact your state representatives. Tell them that privacy isn't negotiable. Tell them that consent matters. Tell them that Black women's healing matters. Use your voice, use your platform, use your power to protect the vulnerable, to amplify the silenced, to create a world where boundaries are sacred. And here's the question I want you to sit with long after this talk ends: whose pain are we erasing in this know all rush? Whose trauma are we dismissing when we prioritize access over consent? Whose healing are we delaying when we refuse to honor boundaries? Because the truth is, when we fight for privacy, we're not just fighting for birth parents. We're fighting for every woman who's been told her no doesn't matter. We're fighting for every woman who's been forced to sacrifice her peace for someone else's comfort. We're fighting for every woman who deserves the right to heal on her own terms. Audrey Watkins taught me that boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges to healing. Privacy isn't secrecy, it's sanctuary. And saying no isn't selfish, it's sacred. So I'm calling you to action today. Be the voice that says, my choice stands. Be the voice that says, my pain isn't your puzzle. Be the voice that says, DNA doesn't own me. Be the voice that protects, that honors, that heals. This is Soft Girl Era. This is where strong Black women unlearn survival, rediscover softness, and reclaim the joy, rest, and freedom they deserve. No capes allowed, no apologies required, just you, your boundaries, and your beautiful, sacred, unapologetic peace. The revolution starts now. The revolution starts with you. Stand up, speak out, protect privacy, honor boundaries, change the world.